Ryan Manship and the team at RedTeam are hired by businesses to identify any vulnerabilities in their company's technology, people, and facilities. As Vice President of RedTeam, his responsibilities include managing a team of ethical hackers, and I love that term, ethical hackers, security testing, and providing security guidance to customers. Prior to his role with RedTeam Security, Ryan led the application security program at Fair Isaac. Ryan will share with you where companies tend to be the most vulnerable and what you can do to start your own protection systems. Ryan's going to be interviewed by award-winning investigative reporter and co-anchor of KELOLAND News at 5, Angela Kennecke. Everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Angela and Ryan.
First of all, Ryan, your company is called the RedTeam, but what you did here in this video that we just watched is called red teaming. Can you explain what red teaming is?
Yeah, am I on? Okay, cool. That's a really good question and worth kind of pointing out, because RedTeam, the name of the company, is one word. Red teaming, the service, a terminology derived from the military, is two words. It's an adversarial attack simulation where, as you saw in the video, we are hired by other companies to come in and test your people and your facilities as well as your technology, to look for security vulnerabilities, help you understand them, and ultimately reduce or remediate some of that risk.
Now, we've just seen a really dramatic example of you breaking into this power utility company, but you have lots of stories to talk about other organizations where you found vulnerabilities as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, I suppose I could probably tell stories up here for hours on end.
Well, give us a couple of good ones.
All right, well, one of the stories that I like the most has to do with kind of testing and validating your expectations, right? So throughout the conference today, we've talked a lot about different things you can do and different ways that you can implement controls to help ensure your company is secure and your degree of diligence and all that. But testing is something that we only talked about a little bit. In one of our engagements, we came up against some physical security controls that have it's like an in-ground radar solution that's supposed to be able to detect movement and that sort of thing. And we're not going to dig it up. We didn't have a way to defeat this. And so what we ended up doing is having a guy go lay kind of on the edge of its range and just hit the ground with a hammer, like a rubber mallet, and just keep hitting the ground. Well, so what happened, right? Well, this caused an alarm. Somebody came out trying to see what's going on. Well, everything looks okay. There's nothing amiss. They can't see the guy hiding in the brush. And so it's just alarming. So it's in the nighttime. This guy goes back home after, comes back out maybe another 2 or 3 times trying to figure out why is this thing alarming? Why is this thing alarming? Until now he stops showing up. Right? So we've got a team waiting for this guy to basically stop showing up so that we can now go in and not have to worry about that security control. The reason I like that story is we didn't have to defeat that control. We got to look at that security control from a bigger picture to understand the people that are associated with that control in addition to the technology. So at that point, I just had to figure out how to defeat the people associated with it and not the technology. Interesting enough, though, they had other security controls that they believed were in place and working well. Sometimes you heard them referred to as shaker wire. That is something that's in the fence that if you were to try to climb a fence, it's going to notice that someone's on the fence, it's going to alarm. So we went up to the fence, we just threw a ladder up one side, put another ladder down the other side, because what better way to get over a big fence? And the shaker wire alarm never went off. Turns out it was either something was wrong with it or it wasn't installed correctly, but they didn't know that. There's no way to know that. And so through testing, they found a weakness in their security chain with a good security control, but because of the person associated with it. They also identified security controls that weren't exactly implemented in the way that they thought. And so, when we start talking about this stuff and why we do it, this is what we're talking about. Whether it's testing your people or your technology or facilities, testing your assumptions and learning what might not be the way you think it is, or what flaws in your process might be there.
We always hear that humans are the greatest weakness, you know, your people, your employees, that that's how most of this stuff, people get in and that's how it happens. But you also mentioned technology weaknesses. Would you say that humans are a greater liability than your technology?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's come up here again today as well, and I think it's true. People are statistically the weakest link. Social engineering is a problem. We talked about education and awareness training. You know, I advocate for that wholeheartedly. I think it's very, very important. But at the same time, one of the gentlemen made a point about a USB stick being picked up out of a parking lot. What we need to remember is that while people are the weakest link, statistically speaking, and we can educate these people, there's multiple different vectors that can lead towards a vulnerability being exploited. And those vectors might come through your technology, they might come through your people, they also might go through your physical security. And so it's why it's really important to understand how your security posture sits in relation to your vulnerabilities across all three different areas of your business.
So you've talked about some frightening scenarios. We saw some frightening scenarios on that video. What do you do with that information? What now?
Well, that's a great question too. I mean, you know, sometimes you get what we call kind of like the mic drop or the report drop. You know, you hire somebody to come in and tell you, sorry, I try not to get too close to that, try to come in and tell you what's wrong, and they drop a really big report on your desk and you don't really know what to do with it. That doesn't really help anyone out. What I'd advocate for is something, of course, similar to what we do, which is build a partnership with whoever you're working with to make sure that at the end of the day, not only is the report actionable, but it's clear you understand it. They'll continue to work with you to help you understand how to fix the things you need to fix, how to put the findings into perspective across different business verticals, right? Because you're decision makers, and you need to understand how to allocate budget. And if you don't understand all of your risk properly, you can't make informed decisions on how to allocate that budget. So what I'd say is you need to work with a provider or somebody who's going to help you understand it, help you fix it, and help you understand it within the context of your business across your people, your technology, and your facilities.
As you mentioned, businesses do only have so much money to allocate to certain areas. Is there one area or two that you would recommend people really focus on with their resources?
That's man, it's really tough to say. It depends on where you're at, you know. There's not one place to start for everybody. It depends on how, I think, mature you are in your security awareness and kind of your security posture to begin with. That being said, though, if under the gun, I had to pick something, I would say security awareness training. Start with your people. Make sure that they're trained and they understand what opportunities they can do to protect themselves, the company, and their families.
I love the term ethical hacker. My brother's also a professional hacker, so hired by a company to do so. What is the most common question you get when people, it looks really cool what you do. Like you do that every day, right? Break into power grids, and it's always exciting.
Yeah, every day, you know, they don't let me rest. Okay, so I think a lot of the people in this room involved in technology get the question of, can you fix my computer? Or can you hack into my neighbor's Wi-Fi or something?
Steal some cable.
Yeah, you get all kinds of weird questions. I think the term ethical hacker is a really, it's good to talk about that for a second, because a hacker inherently is not a bad person. A hacker is just someone who's out to make something work in a way different than it was originally intended. So an ethical hacker is just someone who's doing that for the powers of good. There's malicious actors, there's bad actors, there's a lot of other ways that we can talk about people doing bad things. I don't want to make the word hacker into a bad word. That's why I think it's nice to be able to differentiate that.
How many laws did you break in that video?
0. Well, but that's because I had a get out of jail letter, right? I mean, that's the thing when you think about this. You're breaking and entering. You're lying to people. You're hacking. You're doing things that would otherwise be considered illegal, but you're doing it because the company is paying you to do it, because they're asking you to help them out. As a result, you carry documentation with you that legitimizes your presence and ensures that you don't end up in jail.
But it would have been several felonies had you not had the permission, right?
Well, I couldn't even count them, I think. I like to say that the letter doesn't keep you from getting arrested, it keeps you from getting prosecuted.
So we as individuals all need, maybe some people in this room probably know a lot more than I do because they're in the technical fields about protecting their own information and keeping all of their own personal information safe. We also have loved ones and elderly people, and even now recently we did a report about how a lot of millennials have been targets and have fallen for various scams using technology. So what do we need to do as individuals to really protect our own personal information and our businesses as well?
There's one thing that I always tell people, and it's if you're an individual, password security is where you need to start. There was some discussion today about using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication for accessing privileged accounts. I'm going to advocate that you should use that kind of multi-factor authentication every single opportunity you get. As organizations, we have a responsibility to make password managers available to our employees. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They're not always cheap. Enterprise password management solutions can have a price tag associated with them. But unless we're doing things to manage privilege access, removing shared accounts, you know, and really starting to ensure that we have strong passwords with low password reuse, and we're doing this in our own home lives as well. I mean, that's like 101 stuff, folks. And if we're not doing that, we're not even starting. So.
Ryan, I think there's a lot, you hear a lot of the same things when you talk about cybersecurity or when you hear experts talk about it, but what's coming in the future? What do you see 5 or 10 years from now for being the biggest issue?
Well, that's really tough. You know, it's hard for me to say what's going to be in the near term because there's so much change that's happening all the time. Of course, we see biometrics on the rise quite a bit. You know, you can unlock your phone with your face or with your fingerprint and all that sort of thing, and there's questions about the pros and cons of that. I know further out than 5 to 10 years, you know, well, at least it seems to me it'll be that way. We've got a lot of advancement taking place in the use of artificial intelligence. This is when it becomes economically viable for industry, I don't know, but it's definitely going to have an impact on security. Similarly, concepts like quantum computing are going to have a tremendous impact. Now, again, you know, how long it takes till we run into those things, I couldn't tell you. I will say this, if you think back, there was a time when everyone here in this room, well, I'd say probably everyone here in this room understands the need for penetration testing, right? We kind of say, yeah, we understand we need to do that. But it wasn't always that way, right? There was a time when you still had to get buy-in for pen testing. You still had to sell people on the idea, the value of a penetration test. Similarly, if we think about social engineering, we're not that different, right? We're kind of getting to the point now where we talked about KnowBe4 today, right? We know we need to conduct social engineering campaigns as part of security awareness training. It's going to help our people learn what they need to know. This is a relatively new realization for us as an industry, understanding that this is something we need to do. What I'm suggesting is that physical security needs to be addressed as well. It's not something that we all currently understand that we need to take care of. But I'm telling you, I predict that in the next couple of years, we're going to see a significant increase there. Because as we begin to understand what these vulnerabilities are and the different vectors that lead to these vulnerabilities, we cannot ignore other attack paths, other vectors that lead to these same problems. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the likelihood changes, but if we're evaluating risk based on likelihood and impact, the impact of a vulnerability being exploited through some sort of a physical attack path is just as big or potentially larger than through cyber or through social engineering or whatever else it might be. And so I think that that's a change that we're going to see coming across an industry, especially in things like critical infrastructure and in the financial and the healthcare space. We're just going to have to pay more attention to physical security in addition to our people and our technology.
So let's bring it back to the more immediate future. All these people are going to go back to their employers. Most of them don't, maybe some of you own the companies, but also go back to your employers. You're going to convince your boss to do one thing new. One thing new.
Well, that's tough, you know. If you're not doing security awareness training, do that. If you're not working with if you don't have the people to help you understand your risk, find someone to help you out. It could be me, it could be somebody else, I don't care. Find someone to help you out, help you understand where you're at currently to consider what your next steps forward should be. Maybe it's alignment with a standard like NIST or ISO like was talked about today. I'm fully behind that. I think it's a great idea. You know, maybe it's conducting an audit. Maybe it's conducting testing. It depends on where you're at. Where's your security maturity currently at? And if you can't answer that question very well internally, then find someone to help you answer it.
Ryan, can you share with the people in the room, what are some of the risks associated with free Wi-Fi? Should I be concerned?
Absolutely. I mean, well, if you think about what does it mean to have free Wi-Fi, it means anybody can get on it. And if anybody can get on it, that means that, in theory, they can get access to what data is being transmitted on free Wi-Fi. Maybe it's a risk appetite thing, but I don't use it. You know, I don't use free Wi-Fi. I tether to my phone. If I'm in a situation where I need to use free Wi-Fi, I hop on a VPN right away, so my traffic's encrypted. I know that, you know, we talked about students earlier, right? And all students inevitably end up in a gray area as far as, you know, they're hacking and they're learning and they're learning how to do some of this testing. And I guarantee you, the vast majority of them have tried to sniff traffic over Wi-Fi, whether they'll admit it or not. It's an easy thing to do, and it's so easy, but yet you can get a lot of information. You shouldn't do it, but a lot of people do it. Some people do it for nefarious purposes. Just don't trust open Wi-Fi.
Does it matter where the open Wi-Fi is? Because if you're in a big health system and you're sitting in the waiting room, is that open Wi-Fi any safer than the open Wi-Fi at a coffee shop? Any difference at all?
There are some technical things that can matter, absolutely. What I would focus on is how readily available is the password. If the password's on the wall, or they give it to you when you walk in the door, or it's otherwise just, here's our password to get on the Wi-Fi, that's your first red flag that says, hey, I should be careful and probably not use this.
Another question over here? Oh, one over here. Okay, go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just have a question. Obviously, Ryan, when you went into that co-op and you looked at those things, it had to be kind of like an undercover boss situation. Could you maybe enlighten us a little bit on how those contacts are made with your company? Are they obviously at the CEO level, and then things should be kept secret until the actual attack happens? Otherwise, people would fix things, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, typically, you know, when we're engaged in arranging this kind of an engagement, we're working with management or leadership, and there's a very small number of people who know what's going on. Typically, they have buy-in from a C-suite or whoever has the authority to give that degree of buy-in. Sometimes it varies a little bit, because sometimes sometimes the C-suite's in scope, you know, and so then there's different people involved. I think what's just most important is to make sure that if you're doing a full red team engagement, the group of people that actually know what's going on is restricted to a small number of people, and of course you have buy-in at the right levels, because, well, you can't do it if you don't have buy-in in the right levels, but if too many people know, you're absolutely right. Maybe they don't fix stuff, but word of mouth travels very, very quickly. And so even when we're conducting these engagements, we'll conduct the lower risk aspects of the engagement first to reduce the likelihood of exposure, so that as we're conducting higher and higher risk aspects of the engagement, we're less likely to potentially spoil the engagement or otherwise increase employee awareness of what's going on.
Another question over here?
Ryan, earlier there was a lot of comment about social access, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, things of that nature. Some of us old schoolers knew that if you weren't in LinkedIn, you weren't in. So how do you regulate what information you're putting out there in social media and its value in being used to hack into your own organization?
So with social media, we use it a lot. It's open source intelligence, you know, we use social media to help learn more about companies that, you know, that hire us, to, you know, figure out who we can target, maybe learn more about their job roles, things like spear phishing and other kinds of attacks like that. So having a policy for your organization or your company that says what type of information employees are allowed to put, what type of professional information, employees are allowed to put on websites like LinkedIn or other sites is a really good idea. Now, the degree that you allow them the freedom to do this should depend on kind of the value of your own assets and the company's risk appetite and things of this nature as well. Unfortunately, I'd like to say use common sense, but sometimes that's not as common as we might like it to be.
Should they be teaching their employees how to lock down their Facebook pages, I mean, I think many people don't even know how to do that, how to make their accounts more private.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think Facebook has a place in business. I know a lot of people like using social media and they want to have access to it at work. I just don't think it belongs there. So, you know, and you don't have any business unless...
A lot of people, salespeople use social media to target
So there are,
audiences, right? So they've got business. I have a business page on Facebook.
But that's different, right? As a business page, you're using for business purposes, you're advocating for your business, and you're separating your personal life from that. And so, yeah, in that case, I think it's in a company's interest to help you understand the permissions that you have set up in that social media account, whether it be Facebook or LinkedIn or, I don't know, whatever other social media avenue people are using these days. But I think that's the important piece of this is, first of all, differentiate between what's personal and what's business. If it's not business, it doesn't have a place in business. That's my personal opinion. I know that there's people that'll disagree with me on that, but, you know, hey. And if you're going to let people use it, give them some guidance on how to use it and help them understand the risk that they're bringing to themselves and to the company by using those things at work.
Hi, thank you. In high school, I worked at a grocery store, and we would often be stung for liquor sales. And if we caught the person who was trying to pose as an underage buyer, we got a huge incentive, and it was so exciting. And so I'm just wondering, in your experience, maybe those same principles, have you seen those applied to cybersecurity? So you always hear about the bad stuff, the people that failed miserably. What about those that do well and are really successful? Is there some type of a grading scale, or I know it gets around, but what's your experience with that?
First of all, that's awesome. I love any time we can use positive reinforcement. So I'm a huge advocate of education, right? And we also do, at RedTeam, we do a lot of social engineering. And one of the things that I've been advocating for years, and it's great to see it's catching on in some of the larger companies, is doing these kinds of engagements using positive reinforcement and gamification, right? Because if you think about it, if you fall for something, right, you're duped, you feel bad, you're left with a sense of like...
Shame.
Sure, yeah, it's this bad feeling, this shame, and you don't really want to talk about it, right? You don't want to go talk to your coworkers about the shame you experienced because you made a mistake. And so you end up with these security awareness training programs that kind of train people to keep their mouths shut, almost on accident. And so using positive reinforcement, I think, is a really, really excellent way to get people talking about times when they identified a phishing email, or times when they identified someone on-site social engineering, perhaps, or or blue teams getting rewarded for identifying more advanced red team behavior. Things like this, and they don't have to be large rewards. Gamify this, which means offer small things, or potentials to win things, or different things to incentivize your employees to want to try to catch this stuff and get them talking about it. Because to your point, I think that's wonderful. Any chance that we can use positive reinforcement to help folks identify times when they were successful is very, very critical. Now, of course, we still have businesses to run, and that means there's still clickers, right? And clickers still need to see videos or have extra training, or we need to do things to reduce the risk associated with problem employees. We can't ignore that. That's not smart business. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we need to penalize everyone along the way. Whenever possible, I do believe we should reward them.
Great advice.
Hi.
Another
So
question.
when it comes towards, say, a white hat or, I guess what you might call ethical hackers, or at least they're claiming to be so, that are actually operating outside of color law. They're not exactly authorized by contract. They're more just playing with the system, but aren't looking to cause any sort of damage. I guess within the aspect of your business here, how do you handle this? Well, how do you recommend handling those sorts of things when, obviously these individuals had gone outside law. On the other hand, say this is some kid in high school essentially that's trying to show he's, great, capable, young, scrappy, hungry. And what do we do essentially when we're dealing with someone who is not trying to cause damage, but is playing with the system in ways that are not authorized?
Well, I'll tell you right now, that's a slippery slope, right? They're doing things that are illegal unless there's a bug bounty or there's some other structure around the activity that's taking place. It's just downright illegal. I can't condone it. I don't think it's a good idea. It's a slippery slope. It's important that these kinds of tests, these kinds of engagements are conducted in a controlled way. Because otherwise we're just making noise, right? And we're breaking the law, and maybe someone ends up going to jail. Maybe they don't. Maybe they get away, like the story earlier. They got away and there was no repercussions for it. But what did that leave them with? What lesson did they walk away with? Are they going to do it again in the future and think it's going to be okay? Or if we start accepting this kind of behavior in our organizations, how do we know what's noise and what's not? Oh, we just think that's that high school kid again. Well, it turned out that that's the attacker from North Korea trying to do whatever Jay was talking about earlier, right? So it's a real slippery slope, and I don't think we can tolerate that kind of rogue behavior.
I just want to offer, go back to the positive reinforcement. One thing that we did with our user security training was for every electronic event that they reported to us or forwarded to us, they got so many points. And once they got to a certain point level, they would get like just a $5 gift card. So it wasn't a ton of money, but it's really been beneficial. And then recently we instituted a traveling trophy to institute a little bit of competition. And it's a bobblehead cyber shark trophy, which is, it's dumb, but it's created this competition because the person that has gone the longest without falling for a phishing link is the owner, and it gets to sit on their desk, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. And if they report a physical security event, a door that's propped open that shouldn't be, they actually get double points. So,
that's a great example, and the reason I love that example is that it's something we can all do. The amount of kind of monetary expense associated with that kind of positive reinforcement is near zero, right? How much is a bobblehead, or to calculate point tallies, right? But it instills a little bit of gamification. It adds a little bit of fun, adds that positive reinforcement. It's something all of us could do very, very easily. And it's going, I tell you right now, if you haven't done anything like it, you will see a positive impact if you start doing it.
We get to everybody? I think we did. Well, fantastic message today, Ryan. We really appreciate it. Once again, you can watch the story that I'm doing with Ryan about his video and what they did tonight on KELOLAND News, and there will be a link to the video, and just really appreciate you all coming out for this. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Well, thanks. It's glad to be here. Thank you.